This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
With that, I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. We are all in person, but we are recording. And just a heads up, we cannot turn off the chime when people join online, so price of doing business tonight. First item, is there anyone who has anything to speak to that is not on the agenda? All right. Don't see anyone. Okay, so moving right along to our continued public hearing for Tasty Top Development LLC. We've got a draft decision to go through. I did want to see if the applicant, there were a couple things. One is if you could give an update on Concom, and also I know the plans for the parking had changed since the last one. If you could maybe walk us through that just so we can see what has been done there, that'd be great.
Am I speaking to this microphone now?
That would be great.
Okay.
This thing. Yeah, C 2.0 or C 2.1 looks like they're the detailed.
2.1 would probably be better. But for now, I can give you an update on the Concom. The Conservation Commission met last night. The peer reviewer presented and all the stormwater comments have been addressed. So the conservation agent will be putting together a draft conditions, and they plan to vote on it on the next meeting on November 27th.
Okay, great.
You can start. It's going to take me a moment. I didn't have that plan up.
So we did submit a revised set of plans today, reflecting the changes that were asked of us at the last meeting. I'll point it out when the plan comes up, but we did remove the 24 additional parking spaces from the plans and replace them with green space. We also noted on the plans that they will remain green space unless it's determined that there's parking demand in the future.
And so those spots looked pretty clear, but were there some spots that were removed outright?
No.
There were no, the same number of plans or spots are on this plan, it's just some are potential?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they're grayed out as and labeled as potential future spots.
Any other comments or questions from planning board members? Okay. So for people who haven't done this before, we have a draft decision which is going to sort of guide our discussion tonight, and we have specific findings that we have to make for, in this case, 2 site plan approvals and a special permit?
That's correct.
One under the smart growth zoning district. And we can go through these and discuss it as we go. Jeff, can you maybe explain a little bit about what and how we got to this draft and how it's laid out?
Sure. And so there is a draft that was posted online and is available now for anyone who's viewing at home. So the planning board has a web page for all the projects, and you can find it under the project for 93, 95, 97 Northampton Street. That was posted on Friday, and it has been updated since then. So the board has an updated draft. There has not been substantial changes between the two. What has changed is a lot of summaries of some of the meetings have been added. But the contents of the findings hasn't really changed between the two. So the way a draft decision works is it's pretty common for the planning board. At their last meeting, they instructed me to prepare a draft decision, and it puts into writing some of the items that the board has to consider in terms of the zoning requirements, and then what's the project information that responds to that requirement. So it's fact finding. So it's pretty common that a draft is produced and then reviewed by the board. I think if the board was inclined, they could simply say they reviewed it and vote. But I think this board has a practice of going through it, reviewing the items, discussing things that need to be discussed, and then potentially voting. The vote is based on all the findings and the conditions related to the project.
And in this case, it's 3 votes.
3, yep. So it's structured that there are there is a site plan approval that's for the area of the proposals that's in the smart growth overlay district, so it's the front of this property. And that has certain criteria that we'll go over that are listed. And then there's a potential vote for that item. Then there's a special permit and a plan approval for the area that's in the R15 zone, so it's the area in the back of the property, and that requires a special permit and a plan approval. And so the way the decision's set up is it goes through the requirements, or section 8.3, so those regulate multifamily housing development proposals. And then there are findings under 12.7, which are the special permit findings. And so that's all articulated in this document. And then the planning board, it's set up to vote on the special permit because that requires 4 out of 5 planning board members voting to approve it. And then the plan approval would potentially come last as a vote because if the special permit does not pass, then there's no point in the last approval because it doesn't apply for the plan approval. So there's a lot. It's customary to get a draft decision, but this one is relatively long.
Right, not customary to have it this long. And some of these are going to be very routine things that are obvious, and other ones are going to be a little more subjective and trickier for us to talk through. So I'm going to start on what is page 13 of, I think, the newest draft, which is where the findings start for the Smart Growth Overlay District. And I guess planning board members raise anything if it needs further discussion, if we don't agree with it, if there's something missing or anything along those lines. All right?
And one thing, sorry, Mr. Chairperson,
Yep.
if you are following at home, the page numbers are going to be different.
Okay.
But you said you're going to start on page 13?
Yeah, where the specific findings start, so at the end of all of the meeting summaries.
So if you bear with me for a moment, I'm pulling it up so the people in the room at least and the people at home can see where we start on page 13. And again, the first 13 pages is a summary of the 11 hearings that have happened so far. And actually, some of them are blank at this time, and that will get filled in before the decision is finalized. So page 13 starts there.
All right. So this is with respect to section 7.4 of the Smart Growth Overlay District. Planning board finds 7.45 permitted uses. The planning board finds that the proposed uses of a restaurant, gymnastics studio, daycare facility, retail use, mixed-use commercial and residential are allowed in the highway corridor mixed-use sub-district. In addition, the board finds that pursuant to standards and conditions of table 7.451 for multifamily residential uses over 4 units, that ground floor residential units advance the purposes listed in section 7.4113 and are therefore allowed in building 14 as showed on the plans. 7.451, additional notes A, all uses not specifically mentioned in table 7.4-1 are prohibited. Planning board finds pursuant to the applicant's request dated June 27th, 2023, and under section 7.4113 waivers, the planning board finds that a bank use is compatible with the other uses in the underlying highway business zoning district and is therefore allowed as part of this plan approval. 7.451 additional notes B, the total gross floor area devoted to non-residential uses within a mixed-use development project shall not exceed 50% of total gross floor area of the project. The planning board finds that pursuant to an email from the applicant dated October 12, 2023, this provision is met with 37.7% of the gross floor area devoted to non-residential use.
Pardon, Jesse?
Yep.
I note an extra hyphen at the end of that. Can I ask for it to be stricken?
Oh, good correction. 7.461, number of affordable housing units. Pursuant to the unit density summary on the plans, last revised October 30th, 2023, the proposed number of units in the Smart Growth Overlay District is 58 units. Therefore, the planning board finds that a minimum of 15 of the units will be affordable, 25%. 7.464, cost and eligibility requirements. 4, prior to the granting of any plan approval for a project, the applicant must demonstrate to the satisfaction of the monitoring agent that the method by which such affordable rents or affordable purchase prices are computed shall be consistent with state or federal guidelines for affordability applicable to the city of Easthampton. Planning board waives this requirement under section 7.4113 in favor of requiring a condition on the approval that the information is submitted prior to the issuance of a building permit for any residential use. So that was the condition we discussed a meeting or two ago with the affordable housing expert about procedures for that.
Question real quick.
Yep.
And I'll get this out of the way now because it'll come up, because that's also a condition. We will be seeing it later in conditions, correct?
Yes, I believe that's in there. If not, we will make sure it is. Table 7.3, height and density requirements in the highway corridor mixed-use sub-district. The planning board finds that the, quote, required minimum residential density, quote, end quote, of 20 units per acre is waived under section 7.4113 because providing 58 units in commercial uses is appropriate for the location. 7.481, number of parking spaces. Unless otherwise approved by the PAA, the following maximum number of off-street parking spaces shall be provided by use, either in surface parking, within garages or other structures, or on-street. Planning board finds that a maximum of 186 spaces is allowed, but waives this requirement under section 7.4113 to allow an additional 68 spaces based on the plan's last revised October 30th, 2023. Said waiver allows for 254 spaces and includes a provision for up to an additional 85 parking spaces that could be built based on future demand.
Can I ask, is this based, did you just say that there's another plan set that came in today?
We did submit a plan set today. It has very minor revisions based on some comments from the Conservation Commission meeting last night. It's really just a couple of erosion control notes. They wanted a couple things tweaked, as well as they wanted a 6-inch gap for wildlife crossing underneath the fences around the basins. So those are the two.
But it didn't change the number of parking spaces? Okay.
Nope, that stayed the same.
Thank you.
So just for clarity too, so in this decision throughout, I think the 10/30/2023 plans are referenced, but so do you know the revision date? Is it 11?
It's today.
11/14. So
Okay.
if everything is approved, that date will change throughout.
But the substantive stuff that we're talking about was all in plans that we saw at the last hearing, right? Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to findings that the project meets the City of Easthampton Smart Growth Zoning District design standards. B, purpose. The following design standards are adopted to ensure that the physical character of projects within the Smart Growth Zoning District. 1, will be complementary to nearby buildings and structures. The Planning Board finds, pursuant to the applicant's June 21st, 2023 letter and the Planning Department's Technical Memorandum Number 2, dated April 27th, 2023, which included a preliminary inventory of uses in the underlying zoning district, that, in addition to the residential structures, the proposed commercial uses are a mix of retail and services uses including daycare, gymnastics, a bank, a restaurant. I think, and a restaurant probably there. These uses are similar to those of abutting properties. Several restaurants exist in close proximity to the subject property heading north on Northampton Street. A CVS drugstore, a cannabis dispensary, a gas station, and a mixed-use plaza are across Northampton Street heading north. The size and layout of the buildings within the Smart Growth Overlay District portion of the development are consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. 2, will be consistent with the Comprehensive Housing Plan, the 2008 Master Plan, an area-specific plan, or any other plan document adopted by the city. The Planning Board finds that the proposed project is in substantial conformance with the Housing Production Plan approved by the Easthampton City Council and Planning Board in 2021, as the subject property was one of the specific sites studied for generation of affordable housing. The Planning Board also finds that the project is in substantial conformance with the purposes and intent of the Smart Growth Overlay District, which was approved along Route 10 in 2022. The street front portion of the parcel will contain a bank and a restaurant, which is suitable in the highway business corridor, which meets the city's master plan goal number 6, quote, promote retail and industrial opportunities that do not compete with or adversely impact community character, and strategy number 2, quote, require development to be compatible and scale with surrounding development. 3, will provide for high-density quality development consistent with the character of building types, streetscapes, and other community features traditionally found in densely settled areas, the city or in the region of the densely settled areas of the city or in the region of the city. The Planning Board finds that the project will provide 202 units of new housing with a minimum of 35 units, which will be deed restricted as affordable. The majority of the units will be 2- and 3-bedroom units of high quality with floor areas above average. The project will include community features such as a pool, community garden, and playground area included within the residential component. 4, will provide that non-residential elements of any mixed-use development project are planned and designed as an integral manner to complement the residential uses and help foster vibrant, workable, livable, and attractive neighborhoods consistent with the smart growth goals of MGL Chapter 40R. The Planning Board finds that the project includes a number of non-residential uses that will provide on-site services to the residents and the community as a whole, including a daycare center, youth gymnastics training facility, retail office space, a restaurant, a bank, and contractor shops. Interconnecting sidewalks provide access between the commercial and residential spaces. Section 2, guiding principles. Encourage the production of housing accessible to various income levels. The Planning Board finds that the proposed project will create a variety of housing. Affordable income levels are projected to be between 30% and 120% average median income for the area. This will provide a greater range of affordability than is required by the zoning, which requires an income threshold of only 80% AMI. Create walkable, pedestrian-friendly developments. The Planning Board finds that the project includes an 8-foot wide shared-use path along the main roadway throughout the development. Secondary 6-foot sidewalks connect all the adjacent parking lots and buildings. These systems will provide safe and convenient pedestrian access throughout the development. Connect to existing commercial areas, open space, and civic uses where feasible. The Planning Board finds that the sidewalks on site extend to and connect with sidewalks on Northampton Street. This provides a pedestrian link to adjacent businesses and the downtown area. Provide access to public transportation. The Planning Board finds that a recent Mass DOT project will install a bus stop in close proximity. The project includes a provision for a Valley bike share station along the frontage of Northampton Street, and the trip reduction plan also includes a car share service. Encourage a diversity of housing types where appropriate. The Planning Board finds that the project includes a mix of 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom apartments in each building. The residential and mixed-use buildings range in size from 14 to 26 units each. Protect valuable areas of open space where a diversity of species resides. The Planning Board finds the undisturbed area consists of approximately 35% of the total site, 11 acres. The open space includes areas along the intermittent stream that separates the site. The stormwater management basins will be planted with a wildflower seed mix which will provide pollinator habitat throughout the site. The Planning Board finds that the December 15th, 2022 letter from NHESP, Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, concluded that the project will not result in a prohibited take. Is that right, Jeff?
Capital T?
It's the way Natural Heritage defines it is as a capital T, like a take, whether
Okay.
the project is a take of any kind of habitat or land.
Okay, of state-listed rare species. Encourage mixed-use developments that have a commercial and residential component. The Planning Board finds that the project includes a mix of residential and commercial spaces. There is approximately 122,000 square feet of residential space, 58 dwelling units, and 60,000 square feet of commercial space. Sustainable green building practices, including LEED certifiable, are encouraged wherever possible. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 21st, 2023 letter, the buildings have been designed to achieve many of the LEED principles, including solar arrays on roof, EV charging stations, bicycle and pedestrian accommodations, durable construction materials such as cement board composite siding, membrane roofs, high energy efficiency insulation and heating systems, Energy Star appliances in residential units, and a provision for a Valley bike share system. In addition, the board finds that any projects that receive funding from DHCD require compliance with LEED certification standards, as well as Energy Star certification, and all buildings will be required to be built in compliance with the 2018 International Energy Code for insulation, lighting systems, and HVAC systems. All the lighting throughout the buildings and site will be high-efficiency LED. Heating sources for the residential buildings is proposed to be high-efficiency electric heat pumps.
Are proposed?
Yes, heating sources are proposed. Encourage renewable energy technologies such as solar, geothermal. The Planning Board finds that the project includes PV solar systems on the roofs of each residential building, electric vehicle chargers will be provided at each building, and all the lighting throughout the buildings and site will be high-efficiency LED. Heating sources for the residential buildings are proposed to be high-efficiency electric heat pumps. Include bicycle and sidewalk amenities. The Planning Board finds that the project includes an 8-foot wide shared-use path along the main roadway throughout the development. Secondary 6-foot sidewalks connect all the adjacent parking lots and buildings. Bike racks and bike storage rooms are provided in each of the residential buildings. A Valley Bike Share station is planned at the entrance to the site. Additional guidelines for project design. Projects shall also be designed to meet DHCD multifamily design standards to the maximum extent possible, and a completed design self-evaluation form may be used to support and illustrate how a project meets the guidelines listed herein. The Planning Board finds the DHCD multifamily design standard self-evaluation form Appendix K has been completed and is included with the applicant's June 21st, 2023 letter demonstrating compliance with the guidelines.
Oh, it's a mouthful. Well done.
All significant natural features such as large trees, water courses, scenic points, unique rare habitats, ecological systems, historic plots, and similar community assets should be preserved. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 21st, 2023 letter, the project makes provision for preserving large mature trees along Northampton Street. The project has been designed so that the majority of the work is completed within previously cleared areas. Approximately 35%, 11 acres of the site will be left undisturbed. No work will be completed within 200 feet of the Manhattan River. No work is proposed within the intermittent stream that separates the site. A bridge has been designed that will span clearly across the resource area. A finding was received from Massachusetts Department of Fish and Wildlife that the project will have no impact on habitats of rare endangered species. The remnants of the Hampshire and Hamden Canal that run on the eastern edge of the site have been preserved. Create and link areas of open space throughout the development and to adjacent sites. Consider preserving areas determined to be core habitat and/or critical natural landscape on Biomap 2. The Planning Board finds that all areas of preserved open space within the property will be accessible for pedestrian access. There is no open space on abutting properties that is suitable for a connection. There is only a small area of the property that is listed as core habitat. The December 15th, 2022 letter from the Massachusetts Division of Fish and Wildlife determined the project would not have a negative impact on this habitat. Where possible, preserve the scenic views, specifically views of Mount Tom from major vantage points within the site, especially from major roads and abutting residential neighborhoods. The Planning Board finds that the site has been designed with 2 one-story buildings along the frontage, and these buildings will be designed to be similar modern architecture as the abutting commercial uses. The remaining commercial buildings are set back a minimum of 350 feet from Northampton Street. The site slopes down away from the main roadway. The floor levels of these buildings have been placed at elevations 7 to 11 feet below the grade of Northampton Street. The residential buildings are the tallest structures at approximately 35 feet above ground level. 7 of these buildings will be set 600 plus feet off the main road. They will also be screened from view from Northampton Street by a section of existing trees that is to remain. There are 3 of the residential buildings on the front half of the property. These will be set back a minimum of 750 feet from Northampton Street. The floor level of these buildings are set 18 to 26 feet below the ground level of Northampton Street. With the floor height of the building much lower than the viewpoint at Northampton Street, their perceived height will be significantly less. Landscaping has been included along the frontage, along the internal circulation roadway, within parking lots, and as screening buffer to adjacent residential properties. Limit disturbance of previously undeveloped areas by reducing tree vegetation removal where possible and placement of buildings as far from any wetland resource as is practicable. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 1st, 2023 letter, the project has been designed so that the majority of the work is completed within previously cleared areas. Approximately 35%, 11 acres of the site will be left undisturbed. The project results in no impact to any wetland resource areas. The proposed tree clearing was reduced by approximately 1.3 acres. This was accomplished by eliminating residential building 8 and its associated parking, walkways, and driveway, and by moving buildings 3, 4, and 5. The number of new trees proposed to be planted throughout the site is 190, which will offset some of the proposed tree clearing. In total, 11.5 acres, or 35% of the 33-acre site, is proposed to be undeveloped. There is currently 13.7 acres of wooded area on the site. A total of 4.4 acres of that wooded area is proposed to be cleared for the development, which will leave 9.3 acres of undisturbed wooded area. This leaves approximately 70% of the original wooded area. The majority of the development will be built on unforested land, which includes the old driving range and open field. Approximately 80% of the development will be built on land that has previously been cleared. Excuse me. Limit the disturbance of steep slopes over 25% and avoid the placement of buildings in areas that require extensive alteration of steep slopes and mature vegetation through road, utilities, or building construction. The planning board finds that there is no disturbance of any slope over 25%. To the maximum extent feasible, variations in lot shape and size shall be included to preserve the walkability and spatial character of the neighborhood. The planning board finds that there are no new lots created as part of this project. To complement and integrate the building into the surrounding neighborhood context, break uninteresting box-like forms into smaller, varied masses. The planning board finds that the project includes a variety of different building shapes, sizes, and construction materials. Long walls have been designed with jogs and steps in the facades to provide improved aesthetics.
Just a note there, either my eyes are bad or maybe some of the last sentences fonts are a little different.
It's true.
I made that note.
Busted. All right. Design accessory structures such as garages to be subservient in size, height, and location to overall building. The planning board finds there are no garages proposed. The only accessory type structure would be the small community building by the pool. This building is smaller and shorter than any of the main buildings within the project. Encourage the use of renewable energy technologies such as small-scale building or ground-mounted solar installations, solar canopies over parking lots or other pervious surfaces, behind-the-meter systems which directly supply power to the associated structures are preferred. The planning board finds that the proposed project intends to use a variety of renewable and energy-efficient technologies. The roofs of all of the residential buildings will have PV solar arrays. The buildings will be heated with high-efficiency electric heat pump units. 2 electric vehicle charge stations are to be provided at each of the multifamily units. The commercial buildings will be constructed with the infrastructure in place to allow for future EV stations as required by the building code. Other renewable high energy sources at appropriate scales, such as wind power, geothermal systems, and small-scale hydroelectric generation. The planning board finds that wind or hydroelectric generation systems are not feasible or practical at this location. Encourage the use of sustainable and energy-efficient technologies and techniques, such as pursuit of LEED certification for efficient building design as guided by the LEED V4 Building Design and Construction Project Checklist. Planning board finds that the applicant is agreeable to pursuing LEED certification for the residential and mixed-use buildings. The final design for the building will be completed per the LEED V4 Building Design and Construction Project Checklist. Any projects that receive funding from DHCD are required to meet LEED standards. Pursuit of Energy Star certification for buildings and or the lowest possible residential energy services network home energy rating system score. Planning board finds that the residential buildings will meet the requirements for certification under the EPA Multifamily Energy Star program. The non-residential spaces will be designed in accordance with the Energy Star program for new commercial construction. Any projects that receive funding from DHCD are required to meet Energy Star certification. Efficient lighting, windows, materials, insulation, and heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. The planning board finds that high-efficiency LED lights will be utilized throughout the development, including interior lighting as well as parking lot and roadway lights. All windows and glass doors will be low-E insulated gas-filled double pane. Exterior insulation in all buildings will meet the requirements of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and the Massachusetts Stretch Code amendments. HVAC systems will be high-efficiency electric heat pump units. Low-impact development practices for stormwater management, including rain gardens, green roofs, bioswales, previous pavers, rain barrels, cisterns, etc. The planning board finds that low-impact development practices such as rain gardens and reduced roadway width are incorporated in the design as outlined in the stormwater management report. Pursuit of the site's certification for sustainable landscapes as guided by the site's V2 scorecard summary. The planning board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 1st, 2023 letter, a preliminary review of the site's certification checklist was completed, and it is expected that the project will meet the standards for certification. Pursuit of the National Wildlife Federation Wildlife Habitat certification as guided by the certification checklist. The planning board finds that the site design meets the requirements outlined in the checklist for certification by the National Wildlife Federation as a certified wildlife habitat. The applicant will pursue certification after construction. Landscape design, which seeks to support pollinator species through habitat establishment and long-term management following local guidelines and best practices. The planning board finds that wildflower planting mixes are specified in the stormwater management basins to provide increased pollinator habitat. These areas are only mowed twice a year. They are not mowed weekly like standard lawns. Landscape designs, which only incorporates native, non-invasive plant species with a management plan that prevents the spread of invasive species and minimizes the use of pesticides, herbicides, and/or fungicides. The planning board finds that the proposed planting species were sourced from recommendations contained in the Mass Department of Environmental Protection Stormwater Management Standards. They are native species. Included in the Stormwater Management Report is a narrative on the methods for minimizing the use of fertilizers. Avoid parking layouts that dominate a development. Coordinate siting of parking areas, pedestrian connections, and open space to promote easily accessible, centrally located open space. The planning board finds that the parking lots are broken up into smaller lots throughout the development. This provides easy access for pedestrians from the parking lot to a sidewalk connection. It also provides opportunity for green space and islands and shoulders along the driveways. All parking areas are connected via sidewalks and/or shared use paths. Break large parking areas into smaller ones to reduce their visual impact and provide easier access to pedestrians. The planning board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 1st, 2023 letter, that the parking lots throughout the development are broken up into smaller areas of parking, less than 30 spaces. This provides opportunity for landscaping, sidewalks, etc. Parking and pedestrian light fixtures should be compatible with the building lighting to provide for a contiguous appearance of the project. The planning board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 1st, 2023 letter and the submitted photometric plan, only enough lighting for safety and residents and customers has been provided. All lights are full cutoff, downcast fixtures to ensure no light trespass or glare off-site. All parking lot poles are 18 feet high. All light poles along the main driveway, road, and pedestrian ways are 12 feet high. Section 3 design standards. Unbroken building facades longer than 100 feet shall be avoided. The planning board finds that the residential buildings have been designed with steps in the walls and other architectural features to prevent unbroken facades longer than 100 feet as required. Human scale features such as porches, patios, walkways, and gardens, especially at lower levels within mixed-use buildings, shall be encouraged. The planning board finds that the residential buildings include community patios or decks at each floor level. A playground, a community garden, and a pool are provided in the courtyard of the residential development in the rear of the property. Oversized sidewalks are proposed around the main roadway to allow pedestrian and bicycle access throughout the development. Secondary sidewalks connect each of the buildings and parking lots. The residential structures also include provisions for bike storage for the residents. The use of detached garages to the rear of the lot is highly encouraged. The planning board finds that there are no individual garages or driveways proposed as part of this development. All parking is in common lots connected to the building by accessible sidewalks. The roof design shall provide a variety of building heights and varied roofline articulation within the highway business and traditional neighborhood village sub-districts. The planning board finds that the mixed-use building will all be of varying heights, some being single-story, others 3 stories. The residential apartment buildings have steps in the roofline to provide a broken-up facade. Please see the submitted building elevations and renderings of the residential units. A condition of the approval will require review and approval of building elevations prior to the issuance of a building permit for each building. All buildings shall reflect environmentally responsible design and construction practices governed by the Energy Star program. The planning board finds that the buildings will be constructed in accordance with the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code and the Massachusetts Stretch Code. These codes require very high wall and roof insulation values as well as lighting and HVAC efficiencies. All appliances will be Energy Star rated. The residential buildings will also have solar systems installed on the roof and provide EV chargers at each building. To the greatest extent feasible, all buildings shall conform to the universal access requirement. Sorry, James.
Extent.
Oh, yeah, good catch.
While we're doing small things, on the previous finding about roof designs, there's the please see the submitted building elevations and renderings. I think that can be struck. I think that was a leftover.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's already incorporated into the decision. To the greatest extent feasible, all buildings shall conform to the universal access requirements of 521 CMR, the rules and regulations of the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standards, UFAS. The planning board finds that all buildings in the proposed project will be fully compliant with the referenced accessibility standards. This is a requirement of the Massachusetts Building Code for all new construction. Each neighborhood street shall be designed to encourage pedestrian and bicycle travel by providing short routes to connect residential uses with nearby commercial services, schools, parks, and other neighborhood facilities. The planning board finds that the proposed project includes an 8-foot wide shared-use concrete sidewalk around the perimeter of the main roadway for pedestrian and bicycle use. 6-foot wide sidewalks provide connections from the main thoroughfare to the individual residential and commercial buildings. Sidewalks shall be provided to allow access to adjacent properties and between individual businesses within the development. The planning board finds that the sidewalk system described above extends to Northampton Street to allow interconnection with adjacent businesses and neighborhoods. If the property directly abuts a pedestrian walkway or bikeway right-of-way, a paved access route to the bikeway shall be provided. The planning board finds that the property does not currently abut a walkway or bikeway. However, Mass DOT is in the process of redesigning Northampton Street in front of the property. It is believed that this design will include mixed-use path along one side, a mixed-use path along one side of the street. Sidewalks will extend from the proposed project to Northampton Street to allow connection to any future paths. Where appropriate, bus stops and shelters shall be made available and incorporated into the project design. The planning board finds that a recent MassDOT project will construct a new bus stop to serve the existing route. Pursuant to their June 1st, 2023 letter, if PVTA wishes to further incorporate a bus stop within the development, would be agreeable.
It would be agreeable?
It would be agreeable. The applicant would be agreeable?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's better.
Provisions will be made for a car share service such as Zipcar as outlined in the submitted trip reduction plan. A concrete pad is also proposed along Northampton Street for a future Valley Bike Share station. The applicant shall consult with the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority for the design standards of bus shelters, turning radius for buses, and vehicle access. The planning board finds a recent MassDOT project will construct a new bus stop to serve the existing route. The roadway design allows for turning movement for buses throughout the development. All intersections have appropriate radius for a standard PVTA bus. Pursuant to their June 1st, 2023 letter, if PVTA wishes to further incorporate a bus stop within the development, the applicant would be agreeable. All public streets, I don't think that and is there. Public streets and sidewalks shall provide for deeded public access and shall be constructed in conformance with the design and construction standards and the subdivision rules and regulations for the city of Easthampton in effect as of October 17th, 1990. The planning board finds that all streets within the development will be privately owned. Public access will be allowed on all streets and sidewalks within the development. All off-site construction of roadways shall comply with the most recent edition of the Massachusetts Highway Design Standards as applicable. The planning board finds that all required mitigation work within the Route 10 layout and/or adjacent to it will be completed in accordance with the MassDOT standards and only upon issuance of an access permit. All private roadways shall be allowed in any development provided the way shall be constructed in conformance with the design and construction standards in the subdivision rules and regulations for the city of Easthampton in effect as of October 17th, 1990. The planning board finds that all streets and sidewalks in the development will be privately owned and maintained. The streets are designed in accordance with the subdivision construction standards with the exception of the roadway width. The width of the road was reduced to 23 feet at the request of the city engineer to reduce the total impervious surface on site. All on-site and off-site improvements, which include the installation of utilities, public lighting, sewers, and other public improvements, shall be constructed in accordance with the standards in the subdivision rules and regulations for the city of Easthampton in effect as of October 17th, 1990. The planning board finds that all infrastructure improvements will be designed in accordance with the subdivision construction standards to the maximum extent practicable and as approved by the Department of Public Works. Notwithstanding anything to the contrary within, the use of shared parking to fulfill parking demands noted in section 7.380 of this ordinance that occur at different times of the day is strongly encouraged. Minimum parking requirements may be reduced by the PAA through the plan approval process if the applicant can demonstrate that shared spaces will meet parking demands by using accepted methodologies, e.g. Urban Land Institute Shared Parking Report or other approved studies. The planning board finds that no reduction in parking is requested. The configuration of the proposed parking spaces allowed for sharing of parking between the different uses on site, as many of the commercial uses will have overlapping hours such as daycare and gymnastics or a bank and retail use. The planning board finds that some uses, especially the restaurant and gymnastics facility, will require their own parking facilities and as such has allowed an increase over the maximum number of spaces as well as additional future on-demand spaces. The availability of surplus off-street parking in the vicinity of the use being served and/or the proximity of a bus stop, the availability of public or commercial parking facilities in the vicinity of the use being served, shared use of off-street parking spaces serving other uses having peak user demands at different times, age and other occupancy restrictions that are likely to result in a lower level of auto usage, impact of the parking requirement on the physical environment of the affected lot or adjacent lots, including reduction in green space, destruction of significant existing trees and other vegetation, destruction of existing dwelling units, or loss of pedestrian amenities along public ways. The planning board finds that there are no public or commercial parking facilities in the area, no off-street parking spaces in the area, the proposed residential units are not age restricted, and the applicant is not requesting a reduction in the parking requirements. Locate no more than 25% of the total parking requirements or 10 car spaces, whichever is smaller, along the front yard relative to any principal street, public open space, or pedestrian way. The planning board finds that there are no parking spaces along the front yard of the proposed development, and all proposed parking is in dedicated parking lots within the site. Limit individual parking areas to no more than 30 parking spaces. Surface parking areas larger than 30 parking stalls may be allowed if they are separated from the street by a minimum 30-foot wide landscape buffer, and the applicant can demonstrate that a consolidated parking area produces a superior site plan. The planning board finds that the proposed parking lots are all located greater than 30 feet from the street. The individual lots within the developments are broken up by landscaped islands to limit the number of contiguous spaces to less than 30. Arrange all parking and loading spaces to prevent the backing of automobiles onto any street. The planning board finds that all parking spaces are contained within the proposed development. No backing onto public streets will be required. Proposed developments in highway business and traditional neighborhood village sub-districts are encouraged to use low-impact development standards, drainage systems to closely mimic natural systems that meet the following standards. The planning board finds that the stormwater management system for this project is being reviewed as part of the application for a stormwater permit through the Conservation Commission. The stormwater management system has been designed. That has been designed? Oh, it has been designed in
full compliance.
In full compliance with the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection Stormwater Handbook, as well as the Easthampton Stormwater Ordinance. All of the stormwater from a 1-inch NRCS designed storm drains into the ground and does not leave the site. A 1-inch NRCS designed storm is a storm with 1 inch of rain within a 24-hour period. The planning board finds that the project exceeds this requirement. The Easthampton Stormwater Ordinance requires that the project balance the total volume of water leaving the site before and after development. This results in significant volume of stormwater infiltration to recharge the groundwater. Please see the submitted stormwater report for a detailed narrative on this item. Water leaving the road enters grassed swales, graded flat enough to avoid erosion, and hold and treat water. The planning board finds that the project maintains a total of 7 grassed stormwater management basins. 3 of the basins are designed as infiltration basins, which will capture, treat, and infiltrate the runoff back into the ground. All conveyance methods are appropriate slopes to avoid erosion. Measures to reduce runoff, improve groundwater recharge, and improve stormwater quality, such as rain barrels, cisterns, containers at the base of roof gutter leaders that store stormwater and provide water for future lawn and garden use, or rain gardens, bioswales. Rain is captured and retained in depressions carefully planted with native vegetation and allowed to drain into the ground. Green roofs, plantings mounted on rooftops to slow and absorb rainwater runoff, and or pervious pavers, alternative to impervious pavement, which allows water to permeate the surface of parking paved areas. The planning board finds that the project includes a rain garden located at each residential building. This rain garden will capture runoff, treat it, and infiltrate it back into the ground. Additional measures described above have been incorporated to reduce runoff rates and volumes and provide substantial pollutant removal from the stormwater runoff prior to discharge. Curbs are only appropriate in narrow defined areas without opportunity for grassed swales or in the downtown mixed-use subdistrict. In those areas, curbs shall be designed to be consistent with the standards set forth in the subdivision rules and regulations for the City of Easthampton in effect on October 17th, 1990. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 1st, 2023 letter, the use of grassed swales for conveyance of stormwater is not practical on this SPGZD site. The use of, quote, country drainage, quote, would require an increase in the total project footprint to make allowances for swales along all roads and driveways. The Easthampton Stormwater Ordinance requires total suspended solid removal of 90%, which is in excess of what's required by the statewide Mass DEP stormwater standards. This location also requires a minimum of 44% TSS pretreatment prior to any infiltration of stormwater into the ground. Country drainage systems with the required TSS removal require large vegetated filter strips, mild slopes, and other design constraints that would result in additional land taking to incorporate. Other low-impact development methods include no disturbance to any wetland resource area, minimize site disturbance, the development leaves 35% of the site undisturbed, reducing impervious surface by creating a roadway 23 feet wide versus the standard 24 feet. There are rain gardens designed to treat runoff at each of the residential buildings, and proposing a number of parking spaces to be constructed on on-demand basis only, if proven to be required. All electric, telephone, cable TV, and other such utilities shall be underground from existing roadway utilities to the extent feasible. Parking lot poles lighting. I don't know.
Lighting poles, maybe? Pole, get rid of the
It's
S.
just a single pole.
Let's check the
Parking
actual
lot pole
statute.
lighting.
Pole lighting, okay. Shall not exceed a height of 18 feet, and lighting along the driveways, pedestrian walkways, and sidewalks shall not exceed 12 feet in height. The Planning Board finds that all utilities will be constructed underground within the development. All parking lot light poles are not taller than 18 feet, and all light poles along the main driveway road and pedestrian ways are 12 feet high. Open space, to the greatest extent possible, such open space shall be left in its undisturbed natural condition, or at the discretion of the PAA, it shall be developed so as to be appropriate in size, shape, dimension, location, and character to assure access to and its use as a park, recreational area, and visual amenity for the development and its residents. The Planning Board finds that approximately 11.5 acres, or 35% of the total site, will be left undisturbed by the proposed development. This area will be left in its natural state. These areas will be available for residents' use for passive recreation. Abutting conservation areas. To the extent possible, open space shall be planned as single contiguous areas and configured contiguously with abutting conservation open areas. The PAA may require a project to provide public access from one or more streets, ways, or public access trails. The Planning Board finds that the Edward Dwyer Conservation Area is close to the rear of the property, but is across the Manhan River from the project, and connection between the two would be very difficult. Steep topography, floodplain, and riverfront areas regulated by the Wetland Protection Act separate the two properties. Permanent protection. Open space areas left in their natural condition shall be deed restricted in perpetuity through a permanent conservation restriction. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 1st, 2023 letter, and as a condition of the approval, the open areas will be deed restricted in perpetuity with a conservation restriction, fully formed declaration of covenants, or homeowners association agreement, or similar mechanism for the protection of the remainder of the property. Upon approval by the board, the document shall be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Ownership. The open space shall be owned by a nonprofit land trust, City of Easthampton, or conservation organization, homeowners association, and a permanent conservation easement or deed restriction must be conveyed to the city with city approval, or to a nonprofit trust or conservation organization whose principal purpose is to conserve farmland or open space. In the event that the ownership of the land will remain with the homeowners, a nonprofit homeowners association shall be established. The association shall be responsible for the permanent maintenance of all common lands, protected open space not in public ownership, recreational and thoroughfare facilities, except for such responsibilities assumed by another owner of the common land trust, or conservation organization. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 1st, 2023 letter, And as a condition of the approval, the open areas will be deed restricted in perpetuity with a conservation restriction, fully formed declaration of covenants, or homeowners association agreement, or similar mechanism for the protection of the remainder of the property. Upon approval by the board, the document shall be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Every effort shall be made through the design, layout, and construction of a project to save as many existing mature trees as possible. Accordingly, the applicant shall institute alternative site design methods to assure the best chance of tree survival. The planning board finds that the majority of the development within the HB zone is to be within areas that have previously been removed of trees. Approximately 0.85 acres of trees will be removed of the total 15.8 acres within the highway business zone. Several existing mature trees are highlighted along Northampton Street to be preserved. The applicant shall ensure that at least 35% of the parcel will be shaded through protection of existing replacement and street trees. Plans submitted to the PAA shall show the estimated tree canopies after 15 years of growth, the specific names, sizes, and locations of trees to be planted, and the total area of square feet of the area shaded by tree canopies. In determining the shaded area, measure the shaded area assuming that the shaded area is only that area directly under the drip line. The planning board finds a waiver from this requirement is acceptable because the majority of the portion of the site in the highway business zone is currently cleared of trees and is covered with grass, and the existing trees to remain. Proposed landscape buffers and the proposed street shade trees planted will provide a shaded area of approximately 22% of the site. The existing current condition of the site has approximately 20% of the highway business zoned area shaded. The proposed design results in a net increase of shaded area over the existing conditions. So just a note that that was a waiver that we did not discuss before, but
Meaning
I think,
someone that has an issue with it should raise it now.
yeah, I mean, I think the situation here is that it's actually increasing the shaded area as opposed to the concern here of retaining
It's a no-brainer.
shading that was existing.
It's fine. What is PAA?
Permit Approval Authority,
Thank you.
It's us.
that's us here.
Okay. I just never saw that acronym before.
The PAA will have the discretion to modify tree shading requirements under power lines and other obstructions which prohibit strict compliance with shading requirements, and to give shading credit for off-site trees and sidewalk tree canopies where appropriate. The planning board finds that a waiver has been granted based on the proposed shading conditions, offer a net improvement over the existing site, since the majority of the land within the SGZD is currently cleared of trees. Selection of replacement trees in regard to their number, size, and species shall be determined by the PAA upon recommendation of the tree warden in consultation with a certified arborist on the basis of an analysis of tree canopy conditions, soil conditions, and other relevant factors. The planning board finds that the proposed tree species were obtained from a list contained within the Mass DEP Stormwater Handbook and were selected due to their salt tolerance. When possible, a diversity of trees shall be used with a preference of species native to North America. Please see list of recommended trees for preferred tree species. The planning board finds that 4 different tree species are proposed for streetscape planting. The proposed tree species were obtained from a list contained within the Massachusetts DEP Stormwater Handbook. Use of exotic and invasive plants is prohibited. Applicant shall refer to the latest version of the Massachusetts Prohibited Plant List released by the Department of Agricultural Resources for a full listing of prohibited plant species. The planning board finds that none of the proposed trees or plants are found in the Massachusetts Prohibited Plant List. The applicant will be liable for all planted street trees as to their erectness and good health for 1 calendar year after planting, as determined by the tree warden in consultation with a certified arborist. The planning board finds that the applicant is agreeable to this, and a condition of the approval requires the street trees to be maintained in perpetuity. Landscape buffers. A landscaped buffer strip at least 20 feet wide, continuous except for approved driveway, shall be established adjacent to any public road to visually separate parking and other uses from the road. The buffer strip shall be planted with grass, medium-height shrubs, and shade trees. At all street or driveway intersections, trees and shrubs shall be set back at sufficient distance from such intersections so that they do not present an obstruction to sight lines. The planning board finds that there is a 30-foot landscaped buffer provided between the nearest building and/or parking lot and Northampton Street along the entire frontage. A mix of lawn, trees, and shrubs is proposed. period. Storage areas, exposed storage areas, machinery, service areas, truck loading areas, utility buildings, and structures and other unsightly uses shall be screened from view from neighboring properties and streets using dense, hardy evergreen plantings or earthen berms or wall or tight fence complemented by evergreen plantings. The planning board finds that a 35-foot wide landscape buffer separates the entire SGZD land from the abutting properties along the south property line. All dumpster locations on site are to be screened with solid vinyl fencing. There is no outdoor storage, machine services, or loading areas proposed. Maintenance. All landscaped areas shall be properly maintained. Shrubs or trees which die shall be replaced within one growing season. The planning board finds that pursuant to the applicant's June 1st, 2023 letter, they intend to contract a maintenance company to handle landscaping such as weekly mowing, spring and fall cleanups, annual mulching, and plant pruning, etc. Any plantings that die within the first year will be replaced in kind by the applicant and/or owner. Signs. All signs will conform with Section 10.0 of the Easthampton zoning ordinance. The planning board finds that all proposed signage will comply with Section 10 of the zoning ordinance. Details of signs will be provided to the building department and/or the planning department for approval prior to installation.
Well done.
All right. Any thoughts, objections, comments from planning board members here? The first?
No.
Okay. I think we could take a motion on that.
Site plan approval. I motion to approve the site plan approval for Tasty Top Development LLC.
Second.
In the smart growth overlay, we got to just specify because there's another one.
Sure,
too.
no problem. I rescind my earlier motion. I issue a new motion.
He's got actual language in here for us. I like that.
Fine. Following the conclusion of public hearings and deliberation, I motion that the board votes on a motion to approve the plan approval for the portion of the project located within the Smart Growth Overlay District.
With conditions?
With conditions. Conditions specified. We haven't gone through them yet, should we?
Well, we've outlined them here. Yeah, I guess we should
Yeah,
go through the
we have
list
to go
of them,
through
too.
that.
Well, should we just wait and do all the votes at the end then?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Why not? Let's keep talking.
All
Do you
right.
need a break from talking? Do you
No,
want-
I'm good. I'm just going to keep taking intermittent tea breaks, but
Please allow me to rescind my motion.
I'm okay.
I rescind my second.
All right, now moving on to specific findings under section 8.3, plan approval for multifamily housing. B, multifamily dwellings with at least 50. Oh, sorry.
Just going to interject. Is it worth just recapping now? Because we're pretty far in the weeds here, but that was the smart growth
That was the
overlay
front
district.
part of the project.
Front part of the parcel.
We're now going to the back part of the project, which requires not only plan approval for multifamily housing, but as part of that has a special permit to add multiple residential buildings to the project.
Correct. So you'll be going through, there's 8.3, which are requirements for the multifamily, so the back portion, and then there's also 12.7, which are requirements for that back portion, different than what we just went through for the front portion.
And I just want to toss this out. The idea of doing all the voting at the end, I think is probably is fine or even good. But because this is all fresh, we just went through this and discussed it, it may be valid to look at the conditions now and then vote on this and then proceed to the middle section, just tossing that out there.
We could,
I'm not
some of
saying
these conditions apply to multiple
both.
parts, so I
Yeah.
think if we do all, I think it might make sense to just go through it all, and then we'll do 3 votes
at the end.
at the end anyway.
All right.
And then do we have an opportunity to kind of talk about?
Before we vote, if we want to, yeah.
That's a good idea.
I mean, I think if, and as it comes
Yeah,
up,
that's
people
better.
can feel free to chime in too, but if we want to talk about global stuff at the end before we vote, I think that makes perfect sense for people who want to.
The process is motion, second, discussion.
Yep.
Yep.
Good.
Multifamily dwellings with at least 15% of the dwelling units and not less than 1 unit, meeting the criteria for affordability as defined in section 8.34, shall be permitted in the R5, R10, R15, R35, downtown business, highway business, what's NB? Neighborhood business, and mixed-mill industrial districts as noted in Table 5-1, only upon issuance of plan approval from the planning board as specified in Table 5-1 of this ordinance, and in accordance with the additional requirements specified herein. The planning board finds that only the rear portion of the property is located in the R15 zoning district, and that the project includes 144 units, of which 15% of the dwelling units, 22 units, will be affordable. The development shall be served by a public water system adequate in terms of fire protection and domestic use. The development shall be served by a public sewer or an individual on-lot septic system, which meets the requirements of Title V, State Environmental Code, and the rules and regulations of the Easthampton Board of Health as amended. The planning board finds that pursuant to the January 11th, 2023 letter from the Easthampton Fire Department, the proposed development can initiate their project and continue this project through continuation of their proposed Phase 2 with the current water supply system in place. Development of Phase 3 shall not commence until the current water system on Northampton Street is upgraded to a larger water main or a redundant water supply main is looped through Colonial Avenue of at least 8 inches in size pursuant to a condition of the approval. Sewer service to the project shall be provided through a recorded easement to allow the applicant to cross land of Seltzer to connect to the city sewer interceptor line, or an alternative sewer connection plan has been reviewed and approved in writing by the DPW. 8.32 Dimensional requirements. All multifamily dwelling units shall conform to the dimensional requirements specified in Table 6-1 and 6-2. The planning board finds that pursuant to Table 6-1, the rear portion of the project is located in the R15 zoning district. Pursuant to the applicant plans last revised October 30th, 2023, the unit density summary indicates that the area of that portion of the lot is 18.1 acres. With 5,000 square feet per dwelling unit, 158 units are allowed. The applicant is proposing 144 units with a minimum of 15% of the units, 24 units, as affordable. The planning board finds pursuant to Table 6-2 and the applicant's letter dated October 10th, 2023, and the submitting building elevations, sheet A2.1, last revised November 29th, 2022, the maximum height of the residential building is 31.6 feet, excluding a 4-foot parapet, where 40 feet is the maximum allowed, and 3 stories, where 3 stories is the maximum allowed. The proposed building coverage is 11.9%, where the maximum is 45%. More than one structure may be allowed on a lot in a multifamily housing project by special permit from the planning board, provided that the minimum lot size requirements in Tables 6-1 and 6-2 are met for each structure. The planning board finds that the proposal includes 8 structures in the R15 district, and therefore a special permit under Section 12.7 is required. See separate findings and vote herein. The maximum number of dwelling units per structure shall be 18, with the condition in the R15 and R35 districts that the minimum yard setbacks be increased to 50 feet if a structure contains over 6 units. The planning board finds that all residential buildings in the R15 zoning district are proposed to have 18 units. As shown on the updated site plans dated October 30th, 2023, all residential buildings meet the 50-foot side yard setback under this provision. 8.331, siting and layout requirements. The development shall be integrated into the existing terrain and surrounding landscape and shall be designed to protect abutting properties and community amenities. Building sites shall be, to the extent feasible, minimize use of wetlands, steep slopes, floodplains, hilltops. The planning board finds the proposed site development plan has no impacts on any wetland resource areas. With the exception of minimal drainage piping, there are no impacts to the areas of steep slopes at the rear of the site. The proposed buildings have been located away from the top of the slope and have been shifted further away during the design process. There is no work proposed within the floodplain area. Minimize obstruction of scenic views from publicly accessible locations. The planning board finds that the design includes 2 smaller single-story buildings at each side of the frontage. This maintains a large open corridor looking into the property. The remaining commercial buildings are set back a minimum of 350 feet from Northampton Street. The site slopes down away from the main roadway. The floor levels of these buildings have been placed at elevations 7 to 11 feet below the grade of Northampton Street. The residential buildings are the tallest structures at approximately 35 feet above ground level. 7 of these buildings will be approximately 600 feet from Northampton Street and will be screened from view from Northampton Street by a section of existing trees that is to remain. 3 of the residential buildings on the front half of the property will be significantly set back from Northampton Street. The Floor level of these buildings are set 18 to 26 feet below the ground level of Northampton Street, with the floor height of the building much lower than the viewpoint at Northampton Street. Their perceived height will be less. Preserve unique natural or historical features. The planning board finds that the remnants of the Hampshire and Hamden Canal have been shown on the site plans. All work is to be completed outside of this area to ensure no impact. These areas will be preserved untouched in their current state, and the project has been reviewed by the Easthampton Historical Commission. Minimize tree, vegetation, and soil removal and grade changes. The planning board finds that the majority of the development is located within areas that have been previously cleared. Approximately 4.3 acres of trees will be removed out of the total 34-acre parcel. There will be approximately 11 acres, 35%, of the site left undisturbed by this development. The board finds that pursuant to the applicant's October 10th, 2023 letter, the site has been designed with a balanced cut fill to limit the amount of soils removed from the site. Any topsoil within areas of development will be stockpiled during construction. It will then be reused in lawn and landscaped areas around the development. Any remaining topsoil would be removed from the site and used on other projects in the local area. Maximize open space retention. The planning board finds that there will be approximately 11 acres, 35% of the site left undisturbed by this development. This area can be used by residents for recreation. There will also be a large open green space in the center island of the rear housing area. This area will include a community garden, a playground, and a pool. A condition of the approval will require a conservation restriction, fully formed declaration of covenants, or homeowners association agreement, or similar mechanism for the protection of the remainder of the property. Screen objectionable features from neighboring properties and roadways. The planning board finds that screening will be provided between the proposed buildings and abutting properties. This will be achieved by retaining existing vegetation where possible. Areas that currently do not have vegetation will be planted with a mix of trees and shrubs as required by zoning and in accordance with the landscape plan. Design requirements. Building designs should consider the prevailing character and scale of buildings in the neighborhood and incorporate the use of appropriate building materials, screening, breaks in roof and wall lines, and other architectural techniques. Variation in detail, form, and siting should be used to provide visual interest and avoid monotony. Proposed buildings should relate harmoniously to each other with adequate light, air, circulation, and separation between buildings. The planning board finds that the proposed development is in compliance with all required zoning setbacks, lot coverage, area requirements per unit for the R15 zoning district, number of units per building, and maximum height and maximum stories. Landscaping will be provided around each building, and shade trees will be provided along the roadway and within each parking lot. The buildings will be designed in an architectural style that is in harmony with the neighborhood and the city of Easthampton as a whole. The mixed-use commercial facilities out front will be a mix of architectural styles that will fit the nature of the commercial corridor of Northampton Street. The residential apartment buildings will be a colonial contemporary architectural style with a mix of exterior finish colors and textures. This will allow the separate buildings to have a unique appearance but allow the complex to tie together as a whole. Vehicular and pedestrian access requirements. The plan shall maximize the convenience and safety of vehicles and pedestrian movement within the site and in relation to adjacent ways. The planning board finds that pursuant to the applicant's letter dated November 28, 2022, the project meets this provision because an internal roadway system has been designed to provide adequate circulation within the site. Pedestrian sidewalks are included along the main roadway as well as from the parking lots to the main entrance of each facility. Crosswalks are included as necessary to provide traffic calming at critical points. Pursuant to the applicant's letter dated April 28, 2023, in response to a review by the city engineer, the project was revised in the following ways. The sidewalk that runs along the main roadway and loops around the eastern residential development has been revised to be 8 feet wide. All other sidewalks on site are 6 feet wide, where the city's subdivision regulations
For a sidewalk?
Yeah, regulations for a type 2 subdivision is a minimum width of 5 feet. The proposed speed limit on the main roadway of the development is 25 miles per hour. Plan sheet C-2.1 has been revised to show a speed limit sign near the entrance of the development. The plan provides, and it is a condition of the approval, that the applicant shall provide a valley bike pad location near Northampton Street. Multifamily structures shall have access to roads having sufficient width, suitable grades, and adequate construction to provide for the needs of vehicular traffic generated by the site. Planning Board finds that project provides a 23-foot wide roadway to support the anticipated vehicle truck traffic and maintain safety and function of the road. Connecting walkways with tree belts shall be provided between structures and parking areas within the site and shall be constructed in accordance with the standards set forth in the Easthampton subdivision regulations. The Planning Board finds that the project includes sidewalks throughout which connect the buildings to parking areas and the sidewalk along the main access road, and in most cases, a tree belt is not provided. That section 8.096 of the subdivision regulation requires a 7-foot wide tree belt, which is inconsistent with most project designs, and that section 3.04 of the subdivision regulations allow for a waiver if in the judgment of the board such a waiver is in the public interest and not inconsistent with the intent of the subdivision control law. Based on this, the Planning Board finds that the creation of an 8-foot wide sidewalk adjacent to the main access road where 5 feet is the minimum is a suitable substitute for a large tree belt. Open space buffer and area requirements. The board may require that a minimum of 50% of all land not devoted to dwellings, accessory uses, roads, or other development may be reserved as open space and be made available for active and passive recreation. The Planning Board finds that based on the applicant's proposal, a condition of the approval requires that prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for any unit in Phase 3, the applicant shall present to the Planning Board for a review and approval at a public meeting, proof that the open areas will be deed restricted in perpetuity with a conservation restriction, fully formed declaration of covenants, or homeowners association agreement, or similar mechanism for the protection of the remainder of the property. Upon approval of the board, the document shall be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Multifamily dwellings shall be separated from adjacent properties by buffer strips consisting of trees and/or fencing sufficient to minimize the visual and noise impacts of the development. Such a buffer strip shall be at least 10 feet in width, and it shall contain a screen of plantings. The screen shall not be less than 5 feet in width and 6 feet in height at the time of occupancy of such lot. Individual shrubs or trees shall be planted as close as necessary to create a visual screen and shall thereafter be maintained by the owner or occupants so as to maintain a dense screen year-round. At least 50% of the plantings shall consist of evergreens. A solid wall or fence not to exceed 6 feet in height, complemented by suitable plantings, may be substituted for such landscape buffer strip as approved by the Planning Board. The strip may be part of the yard. The Planning Board finds that this requirement is met via reference to this section on the landscaping plans, and as a condition of approval, a final detailed landscape plan in accordance with this section shall be submitted for review and approval by the Planning Board at a public meeting. Parking, loading, and lighting requirements. To the extent feasible, parking areas shall not be located within a required front yard and shall be screened from public ways and adjacent or abutting properties by building location, fencing, or planting. No individual parking area shall contain more than 14 spaces. Parking spaces shall be located not less than 15 feet from the property line and 10 feet from the back or side property lines. No parking shall be allowed on interior streets. The Planning Board finds that for all the multifamily residential buildings in the R15 zoning district, this criteria is met. Exposed storage areas, machinery, service areas, truck loading areas, utility buildings and structures, and other unsightly uses shall be set back or screened to protect the neighbors from objectionable features. The Planning Board finds that as shown on the submitted plan, each multifamily residential building in the R15 zoning district includes a dumpster location enclosed with a vinyl fence enclosure. No building shall be floodlit. Drives, parking areas, walkways, and entranceways shall be illuminated only by shielded lights not higher than 15 feet. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the submitted photometric plan, this provision is met. Water supply and waste disposal systems shall not place excessive demands on municipal infrastructure. The Planning Board finds that as a condition of the approval, no building permit for any portion of Phase 3 or later shall be issued without upgrading the water service in Northampton Street to a 12-inch line from the West Street to Colonial Ave and providing an 8-inch loop through Colonial Ave to the project as outlined in the January 11th, 2023 letter from the Easthampton Fire Department, or until a viable plan and timeline for funding and installation of water service upgrades is available and said plan is approved in writing by the Easthampton Fire Department. In addition, no building permit for any portion of the project shall be issued until either an easement is recorded to allow the applicant to cross land of Seltzer to connect to the city sewer interceptor line, or an alternative sewer connection plan has been reviewed and approved in writing by the DPW. Stormwater runoff. To the extent feasible, measures for runoff from impervious surfaces should be designed to meet the following objectives in an appropriate manner. Prevent non-point source pollution from urban runoff to streams, water bodies, or groundwater. Prevent the flooding of other neighboring down gradient properties. Promote recharge of groundwater aquifers while preventing pollutants from entering groundwater. The Planning Board finds that the proposed development of the multifamily residential buildings has been designed to avoid any impact to the wetland resource areas on site. The Easthampton Conservation Commission shall issue an order of conditions, or the Mass DEP shall issue a superseding order of conditions for the project for any work within the 100-foot buffer zone to the wetlands area on site. The site is not over any known aquifers or private well protection radius.
Jesse, could I just add, so in this one, the condition would reflect that the Conservation Commission is also issuing a stormwater permit?
Yeah, right.
For some reason, it's not listed in.
Not just the order of conditions of a stormwater permit, right, okay. Utility requirements. Electric, telephone, cable TV, and other such utilities shall be underground. The Planning Board finds that this criteria is met. Accessibility requirements. Developments seeking permitting for deed-restricted multifamily housing for persons over age 55 shall design first-floor units for universal access and shall construct all units to allow for future needed improvements for accessibility to persons with disabilities. The Planning Board finds that this criteria is not applicable. All right, and now we are into our special permit findings under section 12.7 of our zoning ordinance. And this is related to the multifamily special permit that's required for that back part of the project only. All uses for which a special permit is granted shall satisfy the following. The special district requirements set forth in section 7 when applicable. The Planning Board finds that the proposed use requires a special permit under 8.33B for more than one residential structure. The relevant development methods requirements set forth in section 8 when applicable. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the applicant's letter dated January 26, 2023, and pursuant to section 7.1, floodplain and Manhan River Protection District, that no work associated with the project is closer than 100 feet from the bank of the river, and therefore does not fall under this section. The relevant land use regulations set forth in section 10 when applicable. The Planning Board finds that the portion of the project in the R15 zoning district complies with the parking requirements of section 10.1, off-street parking and loading requirements, and table 10-3, which requires a minimum of 1.5 spaces per unit for a project containing 15% affordable units. The site plan standards set forth in this section of the ordinance. The Planning Board finds the site plan approval standards and the special permit standards are substantially the same, and the findings herein demonstrate compliance with both. All other applicable requirements and standards of this ordinance. The Planning Board finds that the project complies with the standards of section 8.3. Special permit criteria for approval. Conformance with the provisions of the ordinances of the City of Easthampton, the general laws of Massachusetts, and all applicable rules and regulations of state and federal agencies. The Planning Board finds that the project is required to obtain an order of conditions and stormwater permit from the Easthampton Conservation Commission, and the project must complete the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act review process and obtain an access permit from Mass DOT. A condition of an approval would require that any significant changes as a result of any of these other approvals will require modification of a Planning Board's permit. Protection of city amenities and abutting properties through the minimizing of any detrimental or offensive uses or destruction of unique or important natural, scenic, or historic features on the site. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the applicant's initial letter dated November 28, 2022, there is no impact. Or are no impacts to any historical features on site, the Easthampton Historical Commission having approved the removal of the house and barn on site, and that in response to a letter received from the Easthampton Historical Commission dated December 19th, 2022, the revised plan set submitted shows the limits of the remaining section of the Hampshire and Hamden Canal and the area is also listed on the plans as do not disturb area.
I think it's just the canal area, the Hampshire and Hamden Canal area. is also
listed, okay.
So get rid of and the.
A condition of the approval requires the developer to install a historical marker in coordination with the Historical Commission. The Planning Board further finds that pursuant to the letter from the Massachusetts Historical Commission dated December 21st, 2022, MHC determined that this project is unlikely to affect significant historic or archaeological resources. The development of the 8 multifamily buildings in the R15 zoning district will not impact any scenic features. The 3-story residential buildings are the tallest structures at approximately 35 feet above ground level. 7 of these buildings will be set 600 feet off of Northampton Street. They will also be screened from view from Northampton Street by a section of existing trees that is to remain. There are 3 of the residential buildings on the front half of the property. These will be set back a minimum of 750 feet from Northampton Street. With the floor height of the building much lower, the floor level of these buildings are set 18 to 26 feet below the ground level of Northampton Street. With the floor height of the building much lower than the viewpoint of Northampton Street, their perceived height will be significantly less. Minimization of traffic and safety impacts of the proposed development on adjacent highways or roads and maximizes the convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site. And Jeff, just so you know, all these letters are wrong in the sub-paragraphs. That might be easy to clean up. Planning Board finds that the internal roadway system has been designed to provide adequate circulation within the site. Pedestrian sidewalks are included along the main access road as well as from the parking lots to the main entrance of each building. Crosswalks are included with speed humps as necessary to provide traffic calming at critical points. Pursuant to the applicant's letter dated April 28, 2023, in response to a review by the city engineer, the project was revised so that the sidewalk that runs along the main roadway and loops around the eastern residential development has increased from 6 feet to 8 feet wide, and all other sidewalks on site are 6 feet wide. The Planning Board further finds that the proposal for a roundabout at the site entrance is supported by abutting property owners, mitigates the anticipated full build trip generation, and provides for pedestrian safety improvements. Said driveway plan is contingent upon final approval by Mass DOT and is subject to conditions related to monitoring to determine the appropriate phase for construction. The project includes potential vehicle access to and from the adjacent property now used by Starbucks as a potential way to mitigate delays for vehicles exiting that property. Turning left. Adequacy of the methods of disposal of sewage and refuse and the drainage of surface and subsurface water. The Planning Board finds that the project will connect to the city's sewer system either through an easement over the Seltzer property to the rear with a connection to the trunk line or via a private pump station through the property and up to Northampton Street. All dumpster locations within the development shall be screened and maintained. The Easthampton Conservation Commission shall issue a stormwater permit under 12-76 of the city ordinance, and all conditions thereto shall be maintained in perpetuity. Adequate means of protecting wetlands, watersheds, aquifers, and well areas. The Planning Board finds that the proposed development of the multifamily residential buildings has been designed to avoid any impact to the wetland resource areas on site. The Easthampton Conservation Commission shall issue an order of conditions, or the Mass DEP shall issue a superseding order of conditions for the project for any work within the 100-foot buffer zone to the wetlands areas on site. The site is not over any known aquifers or private well protection radius. Mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, including the effects of the city's water supply and distribution system, sewage collection and treatment systems, fire protection, and streets. Planning Board finds that pursuant to the January 11th, 2023 letter from the Easthampton Fire Department, the proposed development can initiate their project and continue this project through continuation of their proposed Phase 2 with the current water supply system in place. Development of Phase 3 shall not commence until the current water system on Northampton Street is upgraded to a larger water main or a redundant water supply main is looped through Colonial Avenue of at least 8 inches in size pursuant to a condition of approval. Provision for the off-street loading and unloading of vehicles incidental to the normal operation of the establishment, parking, lighting, and internal traffic control. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to the parking summary on sheet C-0, parking for the multifamily residential buildings meets the requirements of 1.5 spaces per unit. 144 units times 1.5 spaces equals 216 spaces, inclusive of required ADA spaces plus 8 additional spaces for common areas. Applicants' efforts to integrate the development into the existing landscape through design features such as vegetative buffers and retention of open space or agricultural land. The Planning board finds the landscape plan provides a minimum of a 35-foot vegetative buffer along the abutting residential properties to the south as required by section 6.5. This buffer will consist of individual trees or shrubs planted not more than 3 feet on center, within 50% of the planting, with 50% of the plantings being evergreen. The rear of the parcel in the R15 zoning district includes an undisturbed buffer at rear of the property adjacent to the slope and along the intermittent stream. Additional landscaping is provided in front of each building. New shade trees are proposed along the main roadway as well as within the new parking lots. A large common green is proposed to be maintained in the center of the residential development in the rear of the property.
Can we pause for a second?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, are you done with that?
One more sentence.
Okay, go ahead.
Planning board further finds that although the city does not have any zoning ordinance or general ordinances prohibiting development on farmland soils, the applicant has proposed preservation of soils for reuse on the property.
Can we go back to the previous page?
Pipe size.
Pipe size, but also there's a bit of a disconnect. So on the bottom, which is, it says the letter C, it says, development of phase 3 shall not commence until the current water system on Northampton Street is upgraded to a larger water main or a redundant water main is, or a redundant water main is looped through Colonial Ave of at least 8 inches.
Yeah.
On page 30, under 8.336, we say, a condition of the approval that no building permit for any portion of phase 3 shall be issued without upgrading the water service on Northampton Street to 12-inch line from west to Colonial Ave and providing an 8-inch loop through Colonial Ave to the property as outlined in the letter. So is it and or?
It's and, but I think it also, there's a for earlier one too that I was thinking about. I think we said that.
Yeah, I have that underlined as well. It's 8.3C. Development of phase 2 is not commenced until the current water main on Northampton Street is upgraded to a larger water main or redundant water supply main is looped through Colonial Ave of at least 8 inches in size pursuant to a condition of the approval.
8.3C? Which 8.3C?
Page 26, sorry. Page 26, 8.3, multifamily housing, letter C, which actually, another question, is there an A there that should be an A? Because it starts at B and then C.
I think it's just a statement, but not a finding.
Okay, that's fine. Then C, halfway down, it just says, or the loop.
And it has the larger water main without saying the 12 inches.
Yep.
What I would suggest, while we're doing this, if we can go briefly to condition number 4.
Yep.
Because the condition, I think, was drafted first. The condition has been reviewed by
And that came from the fire
DPW and
department,
department. So the condition should be correct.
And so,
The copy and pasting or inserting.
yeah, so condition number 4 has the 12-inch line from West Street to Colonial Ave and providing an 8-inch loop through Colonial Ave.
So that's the proper language.
So that's the proper language. So we need to get, there's 2 of them that reference just larger and need to say 12-inch, and the ors need to be ands.
Ands, yep. Thank you.
Can I just confirm, Jeff, that you're comfortable knowing where those changes need to be made?
Yes, yep, I am. And it's just that the condition came first, so the condition is what wants to be.
Yeah, well, and that was the one that was approved by DPW and Fire Department and accepted by the applicant. All right.
Before you continue, I believe you just finished the one labeled as E.
Highlighted, yep.
Can you tell me, Jeff, perhaps why that might have been highlighted? Was there something there you were trying to draw attention to, or just a remnant?
As was previously pointed out, the numbering, the using word at this level, all the letters got mixed up, and I couldn't get the highlight off. Okay. And then the letter started going wacky, so I had to stop and just keep going. So that can all be adjusted. That's all right. Simple once there's more time.
I wanted to make sure there wasn't something there you were trying to draw attention to.
Sometimes that's the case. All right. F, minimization of the area over which existing vegetation is to be removed. Where tree removal is required, special attention is to be given to the planting of replacement trees. The planning board finds that pursuant to the applicant's letter dated June 1st, 2023, I think that is excessive, the proposed tree clearing was reduced by approximately 1.3 acres. This was accomplished by eliminating residential building 8 and its associated parking, walkways, and driveway, and by moving buildings 3, 4, and 5. The number of new trees proposed to be planted throughout the site is 190, which will significantly help to offset the proposed tree clearing. In total, 11.5 acres, or 35% of the 33-acre parcel, is proposed to be undeveloped. There is currently 13.7 acres of wooded area on site. A total of 4.4 acres of the wooded area is proposed to be cleared for the development, which will leave 9.3 acres of undisturbed wooded area. This leaves approximately 70% of the original wooded area. The planning board finds the city does not have any ordinance which prevents or regulated the amount of tree removal associated with a project. The consistency of the development with respect to setback area, placement of parking, architectural style, and landscaping of the surrounding buildings and development. The planning board finds the proposed development is in compliance with all required zoning setbacks, lot coverage, area requirements per unit for the R15 zoning district, number of units per building, and maximum height and maximum stories. Landscaping will be provided around each building, and shade trees will be provided along the roadway and within each parking lot. The buildings will be designed in an architectural style that is in harmony with the neighborhood and the city of Easthampton as a whole. The residential apartment buildings will be a colonial contemporary architectural style with a mix of exterior finish colors and textures. Yes.
Has it known about this?
Yes.
Are Raleigh's buildings going to be the same color, or to be all different colors? What's happening with that? It says a mix of exterior finished colors and textures. Are they all going to be different?
The intent is to honor that elevation that was submitted, but have slight variations so that they aren't all exactly carbon copies of each other.
All right, so when you look at 8 of these, they're all going to be kind of different.
Yes.
All right, that's all I want.
Different colors, different colors,
different textures, but substantially.
What I'm trying to, I just don't want to see, like what they should call it, like an old-time project where everything's all the same, and you know what I'm trying to say?
Correct. That's not the intention to have.
Make it look different.
Different, but similar.
Okay.
Maybe like a slightly different shade of blue
Yeah,
for
okay.
everyone.
All right.
I had one more sentence there. This will allow separate buildings to have a unique appearance, but allow the complex to tie together as a whole. Adequacy of the measures to prevent pollution of surface or groundwater, to minimize erosion and sedimentation, and to minimize changes in groundwater levels, increased runoff, and potential for flooding. The planning board finds the stormwater management systems on site will be approved by the Easthampton Conservation Commission pursuant to the city's stormwater ordinance. And adequacy of the methods to ensure that the use will not constitute a nuisance by reason of unacceptable level of air or water pollution, excessive noise, or visually flagrant structures and accessories. The planning board finds the proposed multifamily residential buildings will not be a nuisance to abutting properties. There will be no uses that generate air pollution or processed products that would impact groundwater. There will be no significant generation of noise by any of the uses or structures. All of the uses are allowed in the subject zoning district. The building structures and use will be in harmony with the surroundings. So then, conditions. So Jeff, this is like headed within approving the special permit, but I think we probably want to say like in approving the applications or something?
So
these three?
Yes,
Right?
that's fair, yes.
So let's
So
just,
all conditions.
in approving the special permit, site plan approval, like just list them, I guess. Yeah. The planning board includes the following conditions. General. 1, this site plan approval special permit is conditioned upon the applicant obtaining any and all applicable permits and approvals from Mass DOT, driveway access permit, a final certificate from the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, MEPA, and an order of conditions from the Easthampton Conservation Commission, or a superseding order of conditions from Mass DEP. A, prior to commencing any site work associated with any part of this project, the applicant shall present the final plans and permit approved by Mass DOT, as well as any associated final approval from the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act and the Easthampton Conservation Commission or Mass DEP at a public meeting. B, any significant change from the approved preferred roundabout as a result of the Mass DOT permit process shall be presented to the planning board at a public meeting. The purpose of the meeting shall be for the planning board to determine if the change is minor or significant enough to require modification of the approval. C, any significant change from the approved site plans, stormwater management system, or other significant change to the physical characteristics of the project as a result of the MEPA process shall be for the planning board, shall be presented to the planning board to determine if the change is minor or significant enough to require modification of the approval. Any change from the project phasing plan approved as part of this approval, sheets P1 through P4, shall be presented to the planning board at a public meeting. The purpose of the meeting shall be for the planning board to determine if the change is minor or significant enough to require modification of the approval. Said review shall include, but is not limited to, water service requirement and transportation-related conditions herein.
Water and sewer. Oh, yeah, go ahead. If there's a question, I have a comment on letter B.
Danny, did you have a question?
Do we want to include sewer with that, water, sewer?
Water service, sewer requirements?
Sewer service requirement?
Yeah, just.
Yeah, I might as well throw it in there. I mean, it's a non-exhaustive list, but. Jeff, what did you want to say?
I did want to note that the representative from Cernak did raise their hand on the call. They had previously emailed this today. One of the clarifications that was requested is to make sure that the plan reference is up to date and understood which plan is associated with B. So the applicant has presented, the minor revisions. So the plan set will be dated November 14th.
Okay.
With the specific sheet number that references the roundabout. I think that was one thing that the attorney for the Cernaks kind of wanted to make sure was really clear.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's more, and I don't know if you want to entertain any raised hands or comments, but that was something that throughout this, we will update the decision to make sure that it's referring to the November 14th plan set, which will have a list of all the items.
Okay.
And that'll be the approved set of plans.
Right.
So if that makes
All right,
that's
let's
clear.
keep going for now. 2, no building permit for any portion of the project shall be issued until either an easement is recorded to allow the applicant to cross land of Seltzer to connect to the city's sewer interceptor line, or an alternative sewer connection plan has been reviewed and approved in writing by the DPW.
So can I just,
Yep.
this might be where I have to just chime in and just remind the board of a couple things. So this item had come up along the way.
Yep.
That one option for the sewer connection is that it goes off the back of the property. It must cross another person's property in which they need an easement. If that is not possible, there is a plan where there's a private pump station that would be installed, or maybe more than one, on their property and push the sewer up to Northampton Street. And so either is acceptable, and this condition allows for both.
But you have to do one of them.
We have to do one of them.
Right.
Okay.
3, no building permit or site work shall commence without the applicant first submitting to the planning department an irrevocable letter of credit or an equivalent bond surety in the amount of $1 million to be held in a designated account of the city of Easthampton. Do we want to make it clear in here, Jeff, that that's for enforcement of any conditions? I think that was what we discussed last time, right? Or necessary site work or something like that.
And necessary site work to finish a phase. I mean, we had a discussion.
Right.
There is a discussion piece on this.
Right, so I think when we talked about it, the concept was complying with conditions or completion of work if the applicant is unable, unwilling, something like that, but obviously not something we want to do, but it would only be if the city's stuck.
Okay. Yes.
I think
That was the nature.
and that's what we talked about, right? No building permit for any portion of Phase 3 or later shall be issued without upgrading the water service in Northampton Street to a 12-inch line from West Street to Colonial Ave and providing an 8-inch loop through Colonial Ave to the project as outlined in the January 11, 2023 letter from the Easthampton Fire Department, or until a viable plan and timeline for funding and installation of water service upgrades is available and said plan is approved in writing by the Easthampton Fire Department.
So one thing here, just for clarity, because this is a requirement of the approval, the city does want to fund this upgrade and complete the work via hopefully a federal grant, but the condition is understood that if that's not available, feasible, or otherwise is unavailable, it's the applicant's responsibility to do this step. So that's been kind of clear. The desire is for the city to do it because it'll serve multiple property owners along the corridor, but this condition set up that it will be the applicant's responsibility if there's no other funding opportunity for that.
5, if the property is sold, transferred, or otherwise changes ownership and majority control of the new owner changes ownership and majority control, comma, the new owner shall appear before the planning board with a written introduction and narrative confirming that they will remain in compliance with and understand the conditions associated with all aspects of this permit.
So again.
Which we've done before.
Yep,
Yeah.
we've done this before, and it's just to ensure that if the property is sold, there's an opportunity that the planning board understands who that is, and that we've asked those people to acknowledge the conditions of the approval. It doesn't mean that they, and I think it's built in other places that if they need to change something, then it'll fall into those other conditions related to change. But if they can accept all the conditions of the approval, it's an opportunity for the planning board to just see those people and understand that they may be taking ownership and they understand the nature of the permit.
Affordable housing, 6. The project shall include at a minimum the following affordable units. 25% of the dwelling units situated in the smart growth overlay district portion of the property shall be affordable. Prior to the issuance of any building permit for a residential building in the SGZD, the applicant shall present to the planning board at a public meeting final information pursuant to section 7.46, including but not limited to an affordable housing restriction and an affirmative fair housing marketing and resident selection plan approved by DEHCD and or EOHLC. B, 15% of the dwelling units situated in the R15 zoning district portion of the property shall be affordable. C, prior to the issuance of any building permit for a residential building in the R15 zoning district, the applicant shall present to the planning board at a public meeting final information pursuant to section 8.34, including but not limited to a deed restriction for determining maximum resale, if applicable, or an affordable housing restriction, and an affirmative fair housing marketing and resident selection plan approved by DHCD and or EOHLC. D, if the applicant project owner increases the number of affordable units, such a change shall be allowed subject to review of a written narrative regarding the increasing units, including but not limited to number of units, location, AMI provisions, and management information.
So on this one, it might be missing one piece, which I think that this should be presented to the board at a public meeting. So it has been noted several times that if the applicant can or the owner can provide more affordable units, that's a good thing.
Right.
But it does just ask a few of the questions or just an understanding, an opportunity for the planning board to be aware of that and how many units and what would that entail.
Right,
I
so
think
it shall be allowed subject to review by the planning board at a public meeting.
Correct, yes. So I would, yep, thank
Okay.
you.
On
Yep.
that, I just make sure I took it back from page 14, 7.464, we mentioned the purchase prices computed shall be consistent with state and federal guidelines for affordable applicable to the city of Easthampton, and then we waived that requirement in favor of requiring a condition on the approval that the information submitted prior to the issue of a building permit. Is that captured in what you just read, or is that another condition we need to make sure is in there?
It should be included in
Looked to me like
section
it's
7.
related to rates.
Yeah,
It's got to be there.
it's the,
It's page 14, the
yeah.
first bullet there. Just flag that to make sure we capture that at the end. So,
I thought it was, maybe it was in one of the prior drafts, Jeff.
so can we just make sure that that's captured?
Yeah.
We did kind of already agree to it as a condition, just needs to make it to that summary.
Yep.
Actual list of conditions, yep.
And we referenced it earlier in the findings, right?
We did.
That it's, Jeff?
If you can, in the earlier findings, what we just want to confirm is that the rent numbers it's included in 7.46. That's I think that's the key thing to just make sure. So you were saying that it's in the findings under the waiver discussion.
We waived the requirement that they do it now.
Yep.
But they were, because that's not really the process that works now. It's before they get a building permit. They have to present it to us.
Correct. So, okay, so I found it. So it's all in 7.46. That happens to be 7.464.
Yeah.
So cost and eligibility requirements.
Yep.
We can, for clarity purposes, and that's often what we're doing with this, is we can add cost and eligibility requirements within the parentheses of that one condition, just so it's super clear.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Because it's including but not limited.
Yeah, so it is most of that stuff, but that, we want to make sure. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, thank you.
Landscaping, 7, prior to the issuance of any building permit for the pad site and/or the mixed-use commercial units, a final landscape plan is submitted for review and approval by the board at a public meeting. Said plan shall be reviewed for conformance with the provisions of Table 7-5 footnote, or Table 7.5 footnote for Section 6.5. Prior to the issuance of any building permit for residential buildings in the R15 zoning district, a final detailed landscape plan in accordance with Section 8.334B shall be submitted for review and approval by the board at a public meeting. 9, all landscaping required under Section 6.5, Section 8.334, and planted street trees shall be maintained in good repair in perpetuity. 10, building plans. Prior to the issuance of a building permit for said building in the SGZD, the applicant shall present architectural elevations of the following buildings to the planning board at a public meeting. Restaurant, Building 18. For this building, written notice to abutters in accordance with Chapter 40A, Section 11 shall be provided. B, mixed-use commercial residential building, Building 13. C, standalone retail building, Building 15. D, contractors units, Buildings 11 and 12.
Can I ask a question? So I made a note of colors for the residential buildings, and, you know, I don't know if that is something that the board wants to add as a condition under building plans. Right now, all we have is this verbal conversation that the colors of the buildings will vary throughout, and I don't know if that is important enough to have some kind of review of what those colors would be, or proof that that's going to be implemented. So that would be something that...
We might as well, right? If it's something we care about.
I mean, I agree with Harry that it should be varied, but I wouldn't specify colors. I wouldn't go that far. That's not on us. Just that they shall be varied.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I guess we can make it as a condition that they have to be varied and then the building inspector can enforce that. We don't need to see plans before.
Right.
That works for me.
That's fine.
Makes sense.
Transportation, 11. The proponent will conduct a post-development transportation monitoring program, TMP, to evaluate the success of transportation demand management, TDM, measures and validate trip projections and parking demand for the project. The TMP will be conducted by a licensed traffic engineer. The TMP shall, A, conduct automated traffic recorder ATR counts, including vehicle classification for a continuous 7-day period at the site driveway. Perform turning movement counts, TMCs, including vehicles, pedestrians, and bicycles during the weekday morning, 7 to 9 a.m., and weekday evening, 4 to 6 p.m., peak periods at the following locations: Northampton Street, Route 10, site driveway, Northampton Street, Route 10, West Street, and Northampton Street, Route 10, Florence Road, Highland Ave. C, perform parking inventory and occupancy of both vehicle and bicycle parking on site. The occupant, yep.
I got a question for somebody over there. Are these parking spots going to be assigned, or is it first come, first serve, or how's that going to work?
For residential?
Yeah.
Is there a plan for that, or are they all? Yeah, okay, so it's just open parking.
Well, if you're living in it, you can park anywhere you want, doesn't matter where you can, that type of thing? All right, I'm just curious as to what's going on.
D, perform analysis of TMCs collected in each monitoring period at the study area intersections, including synchro, and comparing those results to the results of the traffic impact study. E, compare the site driveway ATR data to the signal warrants and coordinate with Mass DOT should the warrants be met. F, review analysis of study area intersections to determine whether the proposed signal timing changes proposed as mitigation are necessary yet subject to approval of Mass DOT. G, monitor transit ridership counts. H, travel survey of employees and patrons at the site to be administered by the transportation coordinator. 12, the proponent will perform the...
Something for 11.
Okay.
It's just, it seems to me there's not like an overarching frequency of all of these letters. You know, we've got things like monitor these types of counts, but is this to all of this to be done annually, biannually, quarterly?
There was something in there.
It's the next line.
Next line. Oh, yeah, thank you. The proponent will perform the TMP annually, beginning 6 months after the completion.
Continue.
Good thinking, though.
after the completion and issuance of a certificate of occupancy of the first building. The TMP will be performed annually or 6 months after the completion and occupancy of each successive phase of development, whichever time period is less, and will continue for 5 years following the completion of the full build-out of the project. For each monitoring period, the proponent will submit to MassDOT and the City of Easthampton a transportation monitoring program report, including descriptions of the transportation demand management, TDM, implementation program, trip activity, parking inventory and occupancy, and the adequacy of the transportation mitigation. The report will be submitted to MassDOT's Public-Private Development Unit and District 2 office via the Transportation Impact Assessment Monitoring online tool. 13, the applicant will commit to a monitoring program to understand the project's travel patterns and parking demand. The project will monitor the site driveway annually following the completion of Phase 1 and issue of certificate of occupancy. Each year, the proponent and/or project tenants will submit to MassDOT and the City of Easthampton a transportation monitoring program report, including descriptions of the transportation demand management implementation program, trip activity, travel mode shares, parking accommodations, and the adequacy of the transportation mitigation. 14, the applicant has proposed signal timing changes at other local intersections, including Northampton Street, West Street, and Northampton Street, Florence Road, Highland Avenue. These intersections are under MassDOT jurisdiction. The project is subject to a wider MassDOT review through the Massachusetts environmental policy process. This site plan approval special permit is conditioned upon the applicant complying with the Section 61 findings of the process that will be issued by MassDOT. 15, the applicant will commit to the following trip reduction plan. Van pool, carpool incentives, designated parking spaces for carpooling will be provided near commercial buildings. All designated parking spots will be clearly identified with signage. 16, the development will include a concrete pad with a bike rack outside of every building within the development. The proposed bike rack locations are shown on Plan Series C2 of the project plan set, and each residential apartment building will have secure bike storage rooms inside the buildings open to the residents.
I'd like to just make a comment there. Please make those secure and thick. Thank you.
What?
The bike racks.
The bike racks, gotcha.
17, Valley Bike Share Station will be installed on the property along the sidewalk following Northampton Street. The proposed location is shown on Plan Sheet C-2.1 of the project plan set. The applicant will provide an easement to the City of Easthampton if necessary and will work cooperatively to adjust the location if necessary to accommodate the Valley Bike Share program or any requirements of MassDOT. 18, the applicant will construct a driveway connection to the adjacent Starbucks property during construction of the first building if a reasonable agreement can be made with the property owner. Parking. 19, prior to construction of any of the parking spaces designated on the approved plan as future on-demand parking, updated plans and a narrative explaining the need shall be submitted to the board for review and approval at a public meeting. 20, conservation easement. See Section 8.334A and SGZD Design Criteria Section 3E3. Prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for any unit in Phase 3, the applicant shall present to the planning board for review and approval at a public meeting proof that the open areas will be deed restricted in perpetuity with a conservation restriction, fully formed declaration of covenants, or homeowners association agreement or similar mechanism for the protection of the remainder of the property. Upon approval by the board, the document shall be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. The planning department shall be notified in writing, 21, planning board shall be notified in writing a minimum of 5 days prior to the commencement of any site work associated with the project.
Can I ask, so Jeff, the 20 and 21 aren't related to parking. Should they be under other?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Yep.
22, prior to commencing any site work associated with the project, the applicant owner shall, in coordination with the Easthampton Historical Commission, install a historical marker for the Hampshire and Hamden Canal. Major or minor changes. 23, changes in the project involving minor utility or building orientation adjustments or minor adjustments to parking or other site details that do not affect the overall build-out or building envelope of the site may be approved administratively by the building commissioner. Changes in the project involving minor utility or building orientation adjustments or minor adjustments to parking or other site details that do not affect the overall build-out or building envelope of the site. That's the same thing.
Sorry, yep.
I caught that in my draft, but not this one. So the last one is changes deemed significant by the building commissioner may be submitted to the planning board for review at a public meeting for the board to determine if the changes are minor or significant enough to require a modification of the approval with abutters notices, legal advertisement, application, and fee.
Well done, and I feel much more comfortable making a motion now that we've got that out.
Well, so now we've got to do our motions for each one, and then I guess discussion and vote for each one separate. So
Start with the first one.
Public comment, because we have some.
I'm pretty sure that the raising of the hand is being manually put up and put down
Yeah.
to flag. Okay, I just want to make sure that
All right.
you were aware of that.
I will, well, let's hear what Attorney Goodman has to
It's
say.
going to take me a moment.
Okay. I want to make sure that I think we've got sort of what we need for our decision-making. I don't want to rehash things, but I also want to make sure that if there's people here that think we've somehow missed something in this decision, that they get it to us now.
I would think it would be commission only, like conditions only at this point. There's no other public comment. Project.
Yeah, let's try to keep this to a minute, if we can.
Do you want to do 1 minute per? Okay.
I'll do 3 minutes, I think, but let's try it. We're not rehashing things, so.
Okay. As of right now, Elizabeth Goodman is co-host and can unmute herself or turn on her camera if you wish.
Thank you. I only have one simple request, and that is that the applicant has submitted new plans, and the traffic engineer for our client has not been able to review them. And I would like confirmation there was no change in the roundabout plan from the prior version.
There was nothing substantive.
Nothing related to the traffic, the intersection, or anything. It was notes on erosion control.
And I can't hear that person's.
Yeah, no, it's okay. 1 second.
That is correct. There's been no changes to the intersection from the previous submission. It was just minor changes requested by conservation to some notes.
No change to the roundabout?
No.
If I could,
No.
Mr. Chairman?
It was just notes related to erosion control that the Concom had requested. None of the substantive project changed.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, someone in the room here.
Yes, Helen Clement, 165 Park Street. A number of months ago, there was discussion about coordinating emergency exits off of through Colonial Avenue. And listening today, I didn't hear any comments to the effect that the applicant needs to coordinate with that in any way. So if that is a responsibility in any way of the applicant, I just want to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
That's part of the site plan, right, Jeff? The gate?
I would defer to the applicant to clarify how that will work.
Yes, there's a gated emergency connection to Colonial Ave for emergency vehicles only.
And that's in the site plan documents, right?
Correct, it's on the site plans.
Yeah,
That's required.
And that's locked, right? Is it locked?
Only has access for fire department, or emergency
Correct.
vehicles.
And so I do think it is assumed that the applicant owner will coordinate with the fire department to make sure that they have access. Usually, sometimes it's a Knox box, sometimes it's another mechanism. So that has to be coordinated with the fire department. I think that's customary in this case, that will happen.
I mean,
that is how it will work.
I think the fire department will go through either way, so I think it's in their interest to give them access.
They will ask for anything that they deem necessary to make sure that they have access to the gate in case of the emergency. So the one question that it does raise, if we can clarify, is does the driveway connection get built along the construction phase, and what will that look like? It's unclear on this plan what the material will be. Will it be a paved roadway? Does the applicant know that at this point?
The emergency connection will be gravel, and it'll be built in phase 1.
Great.
All right, and I see Danielle is on there, if we can let her in.
It's going to take a moment. So I believe as of now, Danielle can unmute and turn on your camera if you wish.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure that there was something about the buffers between residential properties and commercial properties in the smart growth development portion. I didn't hear it, but that doesn't mean that you said it. There's a lot of information, so I might have missed it.
was a lot.
I don't think it's a specific condition, right? It's part of the landscaping plan that is that was incorporated and it's referenced in the findings.
Correct, and it is specific enough that I believe the reference was to 6.5.
Yep.
That's the section of the ordinance that deals specifically with the buffer between a commercially zoned property and a residentially zoned property, so that is required. That's also required to submit a more detailed landscape plan prior to implementation. And then I think on behalf of the speaker, the restaurant use is subject to a condition that the plans come back with notification.
With notice, so that she's in a butter to that, right? Okay, so I think now we could take the first motion and start discussing that.
All right. I motion to approve the...
Mr. Chair, I see another person in the audience.
Sorry. Hold.
I've only had a few days to review the proposed decision. By laying a draft decision before you tonight, the applicant and the planning department seem intent on bringing this process to a close. To the minds of many in Easthampton, before a host of grave issues with this project have been addressed and before other reviews have been completed. I gather the applicant has financial deadlines looming, but they wasted a year by not responding to numerous requests from the public and the planning board to bring forward a plan which we could all enthusiastically endorse. And it seems that, and it truly pains me to say this, that City Hall is also eager to cement this proposal in its present state to finalize a project that City Hall, by all indications, decided to approve the day the plan came in the door. That is borne out by every technical memorandum, every offered waiver, and many of the proposed findings in this draft. How is it that all those happen to say yes to this project? For a large majority of this community would argue this plan so clearly does not embody the future Easthampton City Council, planners, and people envisioned when they drafted the Smart Growth and Ordinance, the Open Space and Recreation Plan, and prepared Easthampton's master plan. Yes, tweaks have been made, and I appreciate them. In fact, a few substantial changes are included in the plan before you, made to satisfy landowners without whose consent this project could not be realized, or to respond to the traffic concerns and engineering details both the public and the planning board insisted be resolved. But what about all the other aspects of this project? What about the loss of prime farmland, the irreplaceable habitat, the unresearched cultural heritage on the site? And not least, what about the unique opportunity this site offers to create a coherent neighborhood which works, which creates ample affordable housing in an attractive and vibrant, people-centered setting, which celebrates and doesn't destroy what makes this site and Easthampton special? There is still time to meet that challenge. Despite the pressure placed on the planning board tonight, it is not too late to insist on that vision, to recall why you are here, to carry out all the goals the city has settled upon over the past decades. Those were adopted after rueful reflection on what Easthampton lost in the fever to develop the plains and the edges of town, threatening your water supply, losing your farms, and building in wetlands and up to the very banks of streams. We can't undo what was done back then when we didn't know better and didn't appreciate what was at stake. But now you know, and now you can do better. Please weigh your decisions carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, James?
We're good?
I think we're good.
All right. I motion to approve the plan approval for Tasty Top Development LLC for the portion of the project located within the Smart Growth Overlay District with the aforementioned conditions.
I will second that.
All right, so this is the Smart Growth project in the front. I don't know if people want to discuss their thoughts about this or why they're thinking what they're thinking or not. I mean, to me, this part was easier for me because I think it's very consistent. It's a larger project than we have, but it's all the different projects I think are things that you could go down Route 10 and find they're already there in a similar format. So I'm a little wary of the sort of big swing giant project part, but I don't think the zoning really gives us a tool to restrict that for like gradual development. And so for me, this part, I think is pretty straightforward from my perspective.
I would say that overall, I've heard a lot of concerns. We have addressed many of them. And my comments really are about all three phases of this, so I'll just kind of summarize them now. At the end of the day, I feel that overall, a vast majority, this is a very beneficial project to Easthampton. I don't agree with some of the commentary I've heard that we've left things, especially some of the commentary we just heard, that we've left things undiscussed or haven't resolved certain issues. I think we've done an exceptional job over the last year pushing this to a good place for this city, and I'm excited to vote in favor of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo some of that. I think that we, as a group, have worked really hard to find solutions that are beneficial to the city and to, for the applicant, but also there's, someone asked, what does Easthampton get? I mean, we get more people in our community that will increase our school attendance. It will increase our tax base. It provides affordable housing. I think that there's a lot of benefits to this project. Yes, there are impacts to our land, but if you look at Easthampton and you look at the actual open space and the mountain and all the trails that we have in our city, this is why I live here. I love being in the woods. I walk every day in the woods. I'm in Mutter's Field almost every day and hiking on the mountain, and I love Easthampton for that. But this project doesn't take away from that. There's still beautiful views in our city. There's still gorgeous trail systems. I also think that the discussion about the views that we're going to lose from the project, quote unquote, and somehow I can't even fathom that. Yes, there are great views there, but there are great views all around the city when you drive by or when you walk by. There are beautiful views that everyone should enjoy, including the people that will live and work and play at this site, and they deserve that view just as much as anyone else does. As far as the infrastructure, we've talked about all the infrastructure that needs to be improved for this project to continue. As we've discussed in detail, the traffic is the purview of Mass DOT ultimately, and we've done a very good job coming up with a recommended plan for the road and for traffic. I think the phasing is good. I think all of the stormwater and environmental features have been handily covered by the Concom. So I really feel like this is ultimately, another person said, to keep the bucolic nature of our city. And I loved that phrase because I've been using that word ever since about how much I love this city. And it's still a bucolic city, even when we have more people that live here. And so I love Easthampton, and I think that this project has really great benefits ultimately to the project. I also am okay with the height of the buildings because of the way the ground slopes down in the back. It's not going to impact the views, in my opinion. So I really feel like ultimately that's everything I really need to say about my feelings about the project.
Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we need affordable housing in Easthampton. We need housing everywhere. We need workforce housing. And I think the developer is working with the community to get both the housing and workforce housing and low-cost housing in town. That's it.
I kind of gave my opinion last meeting, but I'll echo it and try to be brief about it. But I think this process in this year has kind of shown a lot of passion from the city, and it's kind of shown passion from, I could count maybe a dozen different special interest groups. So folks that are pro-development, folks that want no development, folks with children, without children, folks in the twilight of their life, folks just getting into the workforce. There's traffic, there's environmental issues, there's engineering issues, there's so many things, right? There's affordable housing, and there's just housing inventory in general. So it's been quite a challenge to, well, and I'll just say that our community isn't just one of those groups, and the city isn't just one of those thought processes. It's all of it together. To weigh all of that, balance all of that, and to come up with, through this process, something that essentially takes 12 circles, creates a Venn diagram, and have that center of all of those 12 Venn diagrams grow at least enough in this year, I think is quite an accomplishment from all the folks out here, the folks sitting beside me, and trust me when I say all the voices were heard and cared for and thought about to the best of practical ability. So that's all I have to say.
Great.
Obligation to share, Harry. Is there a vote or you want to talk?
I'll go along with the front part of this.
Okay.
We'll put it that way.
All right, so this is for the plan approval for smart growth. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstaining? All right.
Ready for the
Moving
next
on to
one?
the next one.
All right. I motion to approve the special permit for Tasty Top Development LLC for more than one multifamily residential building under section 8.32.
Second that.
All right, this
We're
one,
gonna discuss
you
this.
want to go, we are, so, you want to talk first? Do you want me to?
Oh, go ahead.
This one to me is harder. I really did not like the level of tree removal back here, and I felt like they could have done better with it. I know that there were efforts made to try to limit that. I think the truth is that we don't have a good tree removal ordinance. I mean, what you see here in the ordinance is what we have to work with. And so to the extent people are frustrated with the things we can and can't consider, that's stuff that can be changed for the future. We can't change zoning in the middle of a process, but there's going to be more things coming. We've dealt with this before. The bylaws really just ask that the applicant minimizes tree removal based on what they're proposing. And so I think that was done. I'm not thrilled with it, but I think that they've met their burden on that part. So I think with this back part, I'm holding my nose and probably voting for this, but that's sort of my feeling on that section.
I totally agree with what you said. I want someone to explain to me. I know I'm going to get crushed on this. I know I am. It says buildings will be in harmony with the neighborhood and the city of Easthampton as a whole. I want someone to explain to me how are you going to have 8 or 9 buildings, 3 stories high, that's going to be in harmony with the neighborhood and Easthampton as a whole. Somebody explain that to me, please.
I can.
How?
So if you look at the new building on Cottage Street that's just been built,
It's not a 3-story building.
it's at least a 3-story building. It's probably the one where Jim's package store used to be.
That's one building. It's not 8.
Well, yeah, it's one building, but it's got variation in color. It's got the same sort of texture differences. You're going to see buildings of similar structure to that. Yes, there will be more than one, but there's plenty of other developments in the city that are more than one building.
So that was sort of where I was getting with my first
I'm
comment.
just worried about if this gets passed like this, what's going to stop if we're having another 4 or 5 more like this?
I mean, nothing in our current zoning.
Bylaws.
And to be honest, I'm not sure that's bad.
That's fair. I mean, Harry, this was the thing I said at the beginning of this, where I think it's a lot more at once than a single project out there, but I think that the individual components of it exist all up and down Route 10. And so, again, I don't love the, big swing for everything at once, but I don't think our bylaw really lets me at least feel comfortable voting against that part of it. But I agree, it's a bigger project than we ever had, but that's also, I don't think that's like the restriction that you could never do anything bigger than is already there. So I get your frustration with that.
It's not like it's a strip mall. I mean, they're attractively designed buildings with all the right forethought.
It's not profitable. It just isn't. Do the math on the thing.
That's not our,
Yeah,
That's not our problem.
Capitalism
yeah,
isn't us.
it's a good thing we haven't run a bank. But I think that also when we think about like the Ferry Street Mills, that's 5 or 6, 7 building, or I don't know what it's going to be at the end because they just modified the last one into one big building. And they're all similar style. And so, I mean, I'm not saying that this is going to be a factory-looking place because it doesn't seem to be that, but we have other developments like that in the city. I think it feels like it fits in the city to me. I don't see it as being, originally, before I saw the renderings and I saw a bunch of rectangles, yeah, it looked like an institution to me and I didn't like it. But now that I've seen the renderings of the buildings, I'm not against the way they're going to look, especially now that I've seen example buildings.
Well, the only thing that saves me on this whole thing is when they said they're all going to be different. They're all going to be a different color. And that's about the only thing that saves me on this.
Texture.
I mean, the other thing is that the city has looked at this since before I've been here, and this parcel has been rezoned and reconsidered. I mean, it's in the highway business. It's in the smart growth zoning district. The city has had a chance to protect this, either buying it or changing the zoning on it for decades since they've known it was a problem, and that hasn't been a decision that anyone wanted to make. So again, we're here with sort of the tools that the city gives us, and I feel like on that one, again, I'm holding my nose on some of this because it's not what I would do if I was, Emperor of Easthampton, but that's not the tools we have here, and I think there's only certain things that we can consider, so.
Totally agree.
Any other comments before we vote on this one? All right, so this is on the special permit for the multifamily component of that section. Voting to grant the special permit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Okay. Last one.
All right. I motion to approve the plan approval for Tasty Top Development LLC for multifamily with 15% affordable under Section 8.3 with the aforementioned findings and conditions.
I'll second that.
Any other comments? And we've spoken our mind. All right. All those in favor of the site plan approval?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? All right.
Thank you.
I mean, I will say this has been a long process. I think we all appreciate everyone's input and participation, and we will work on getting a final signed decision to you guys as soon as we can.
I'd like to add that if anyone has small children and difficulty putting them to bed, this recording on Easthampton Media is available.
My reading was pretty dramatic, I thought.
I'll make a motion to end tonight's meeting, November 14th of the Easthampton Planning Board.
Second that.
Thank you. All those in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
All right. Thanks, folks. And Jeff, thank you.
Say thank you to the board.